All right, we'll wait just a little bit longer. I know um, looks like people are still coming in, so that's great. As I mentioned, if there's anything you want to see me kind of present or demo specifically, or a particular question you might have, feel free to type that um, in the chat or the question and answer, and we'll get to that. We are going to talk about some basics. And then get into we can give a sneak peek of some of the new features we're working on, but I won't go into a lot of detail on those new features just yet. Um, all right, well, looks like it's a little past 1, so I'll just go ahead and get started. Um, Thanks so much for joining us today. I appreciate everyone taking time out of their day to jump on here in all the craziness. Um, but we wanted to do kind of just this basics webinar here as we're getting ready to launch some brand new features. And so give everyone the chance to kind of get caught back up to speed, so to speak, or to see some of the features they might have missed along the way to this point before we release those new features either later this month or the beginning of September. So the agenda for today, if I can get to that, like I mentioned, we want to take your questions or any topic requests. So if you have anything you want me to talk about specifically, or even if it's like a very specific question to your model, feel free to ask that here. If it's too specific, you can certainly follow up with an email or a phone call afterwards. No problem there. But we're going to go through just some basic review here and how to enter the data in the model, modeling incentives, and looking at the results. I'm going to touch on a couple common solutions as clients call me with questions or looking at projects with clients. Just kind of point out a couple of the things that seem to be helpful solutions for some clients. Give a couple reminders about things that you just might not be aware of, or maybe you know all these things. That would be great if you did, but a couple reminders on a couple things there. And then, as I mentioned, we'll give a sneak peek at our major update that we've got in the works here for the next in the next few weeks. So with that, again, I'm gonna ask you to send in your questions or any topics to be addressed. I can kind of repeat the same stuff I always do, or if you have a question and send me off in a different direction, that would be great too. I'm going to jump over, and we're going to use one of my test accounts today. This is a Texas-based client. This is again just a dummy account, so there's no legitimate project data in this, but it'll serve as a good model to kind of take a look at some of these basics we've talked about. So I'm here, it's as if I've just logged in. We're on our active project list. I'm going to click on this project here and go into our project control center. And so when we do that, we can see in this case where I've already got a project, we can see two scenarios in here. I've got one for 100 jobs and one for 125 jobs. Essentially, this project BTA is really just kind of iterating through a couple different options on number of jobs. So as I'm just on this control center without getting too far in, I'll just kind of talk about some of the things on here already. I'm using the scenario names here to help us identify what's going on in that particular scenario. So this is 100 jobs, this is 125. We can rename these at any point and just kind of accidentally click on the scenario and go into it. But we can rename the scenarios at any time in there, or we can also rename them up in the header here like you see it. I'm going to go back to that control center because I did not mean to click in. The other thing that we can do on this control center is to kind of get a preview of the results. So rather than clicking in and going and seeing everything in the actual scenario, if we're just trying to kind of refresh our memory about what was going on here, we can see our 125 job scenarios highlighted. We've got this little preview button. We can see, okay, there's the 125 direct jobs, total of 278, all the other details. In this case, the city's net benefit is 925,000. If I wanted to see kind of those same numbers, but for the other scenario, we can click on preview and we'll see now this is the 100 jobs with a slightly lower net benefit in this case. So the jobs were a little bit of a boost there in the overall net benefits. You see this is out over 15 years. net benefits. They changed a little bit, honestly, they didn't change that much. So that is what we're looking at it on an individual project, looking at all of the scenarios within the project control center. Now, if I want to, I'll just go ahead and click in here. And this one, we've actually already obviously entered a lot of the data that we're going to use for the analysis. But we can see I've got the data plugged in, but we'll kind of look at some of the incentives and some of the other things here as well. So on this scenario info page, we've got kind of, again, our main data entry point, so all of the project specific information. If we start up here, we've got a box for the description. I didn't use it. You don't have to. We get another shot at renaming that scenario if we want. We've got a place for a description. This description, as it notes here, will be shown on the first page of the detailed report. As you may know, the summary report doesn't show a description at all. So if you're really just focused on those summary reports, you don't even have to put anything in here. But it can be helpful to provide some context to that printed report if you want to do that. The other pieces of information here across the top that we can plug in are the location, and this is where we can select the taxing districts or even put in an address. Then finally, we've got our scenario industry input where we can find the NAICS code and the corresponding multipliers. And so in this case, we've got a pretty strong multiplier. So if we look at this one, type 2 employment multiplier for our chemical manufacturing is 2.2. That's a pretty strong multiplier. And we'll see that come through if we close out of this. The 2.2 multiplier is at work here, where we have 100 direct jobs, and then we have 222 total jobs. So the way to interpret and kind of understand what's going on here, we've got a type 2 employment multiplier of 2.225. And that means that for every direct job that's created, there's 2.225 total jobs. And so that is when the jobs are 100, it's pretty easy to see that multiplier at play. The other multiplier that we were looking at there in the industry modal was the earnings multiplier of 1.6, let's call it in this case. So that's a little bit less than the employment multiplier. And generally speaking, what this means is, the spin-off workers make a little bit less than the direct workers in that case when there's that ratio, and you can kind of see that here. Our direct workers are making 50,000, the spin-off workers are making about 24,000. So on this left-hand side is what we're plugging in about our jobs. Here we've got the 100, they're being phased in over the three years. Then got dogs in the background, sorry about that, she's getting excited. We've got workers relocating. This is, again, an input we've probably talked about a lot, but the idea here is that we're asking for, out of those 100 workers, how many or what percent are moving to the city. And so depending on the project, you may know that there are a lot of workers relocating to the city. In that case, you might bump this up and say, well, it's going to certainly be more than 12.5 workers are relocating to the city or something like that. Maybe they've told you that they're offering relocation assistance or something, and so that number might be higher. In another case, where they're hiring 100 positions, but they're more labor positions or easily filled from the local workforce, you might not expect very many or any at all to relocate for this job. So this is kind of an important one to think through, just some of those secondary effects about a project. The next section here is for salaries, and in this case, I've plugged in 50,000 for the first couple of years, and then I've had it increase by 3% over the remainder of that period. We can see what that looks like here. Again, this one is set to 15 years. If I continue, we've got our capital investment here. This is showing 6 million invested in year 1, and then additional building investment in year 3. So a little bit of a phase into the employment. We can kind of see that here. The first 2 years are a little bit lower. There's a little bump in year 3, and then it kind of corresponds at a higher level of impact in those net benefits. And this is kind of a function of the property taxes kind of jumping there in year 2 and getting a little extra sales tax, or year 3. So that kind of makes sense as we're looking at this. We didn't put anything in for building permits and fees, which is fine. No inventories for this project, no taxable purchases, and no taxable sales. On this right-hand side, we're focusing here on the city, but we could certainly focus on the county if we wanted to. If we look here, we've got these little icons in the upper right for the graph and a table. If I click on the table, we can see those net benefits over the 15-year period. So if we just trying to zoom in on this net benefit over the 15 years, you can see it kind of, like I mentioned, starts out a little low, bumps up in year 3, and then kind of levels off. You can see it sticks around 57 to 60,000 over that, the main part of this. You can see that visually, but you can also get the real raw numbers there in that table. So that's a lot of this data that we've got in here for the project. If I click on the public support, just to kind of go through here, we can see we've got a little bit of a summary of our incentives already. So the public support overview is showing us that the city and the county are both offering a property tax incentive, and at least as modeled anyway, and the city is considering the non-tax incentive of $200,000. So in total, if we're thinking about the package that you're presenting to the company, the total incentive package is about $225,000. Now again, most of that is coming in the form of this non-tax incentive, and then only about $25,000 is from the property tax incentive. We want to see, in this case, again, we've already got the information plugged in. If we go to the city tab here, we can see what that is, and if we wanted to adjust it, we certainly could. So we've got a property tax abatement on the FF&E, and it's got this kind of declining scale over the 5 years. So we can see that as we model in that FF&E property tax abatement, over time, we can see those values here on the right-hand side. Another nice feature, again, here will be that table if you really want to see the actual numbers for each year of that abatement to get to the 16,000 from the city. If you wanted to, if the city was considering doing something a little bit more beyond this, they could plug in, another let's say 100% abatement on the building for the first 10 years in this case. You can see this is actually amounting to quite a bit more in terms of the property tax abatement. In this case, what's kind of cool, again, the table here helps you identify the total abatement was $377,000 now. We can see most of that is now coming in the form of that building abatement. So that's kind of the big shaker, mover and shaker on this one. Go back to I like the graph view. And the cool thing, and again, this is maybe just something if you're haven't seen it before or haven't played with it. The check mark here at the top is really just indicating whether or not you want to apply that abatement. And so rather than have you come in here and delete, the 100 that you had the whole way down, if we leave those in there, we can just hit this check mark and it'll get rid of that building abatement. So this helps you kind of toggle between those situations. Certainly you can do different scenarios and so forth, but you can go back and forth on those types of things. As I scroll down here, we're going to get to our non-tax incentive that we had seen, the $200,000. We can specify really any way we want. We've got it on the payback here, which is kind of weird right now, but we'll do it on a per job basis of $2,000. We had 100 jobs, $2,000 per job gets us the $200,000 incentive overall. We can see graphically here the amounts of those incentives being paid out, 50,000 in years 1 and 2, and then 100,000 by year 3. So these gray bars here at the bottom are showing the timing of the incentive payment, and then this gray line is showing us the total incentive amount. So kind of just giving us a reference line as we look at this graph. Now, the orange line is showing us our net benefits. So what this project is doing for the city is being captured by that orange line there. And so over time, these are the cumulative net benefits over the 15-year period. The city, in this case, is getting about $862,000 of net benefits. And we can see there's an intersection here somewhere between years 3 and year 4 where this orange line crosses that gray line. And that's that's identifying the payback period. So the point at which the city will have collected enough in net benefits to cover the value of that incentive. And again, we're thinking of that incentive as an investment in the project. So that net benefit represents the return. And so we can calculate, as you see here, our rate of return. This is the average annual net benefit divided by the incentive amount. So we've got $862,000 over 15 years, and the initial investment was $200,000. That gives us our rate of return of about 29%. So that is just a little bit of the interpretation there on our incentives. As I mentioned earlier, when we saw that summary, we had a different abatement. In this case, the schedule is a little different. The county is doing 50% on the FF&E for 5 years. And that one, again, doesn't add up to a ton, but we are offering a little bit of an abatement here on this. So that's looking at our public support table. I'm going to go over to our reports, and again, we've got the summary reports where we can look at it kind of from a perspective of an individual district, and then we can look at a detailed report where we kind of get all of the details. Up here, we've got our economic impact, so kind of we're trying to put everything into one page here for these summary reports. So in the upper right, we've got our economic impacts, then we have our fiscal impacts detailed in the chart, as well as the table here. And then the incentive analysis is kind of boxed off here in this gray area. So just to start again with these, the economic impacts, we had initially put in 100 jobs, and we identified our multiplier industry, and we saw it was about 222 total jobs. We had a question in Zoom, so feel free to use Zoom for questions in the chat or in the Q&A. The question was how often the jobs multipliers change, and RIMS, so the multipliers that we're using in our model are from RIMS 2, so from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and we get them for your specific region or county there. And they typically, we've been in the cycle, so RIMS 2 has gone back and forth a little bit with their program at the BEA, and there was a time when they weren't updating them as frequently. It appears they've gotten into a little bit of a more frequent cycle of about every year, or maybe every year and a half. And so we will update the multipliers in your account kind of as we do that annual update for you. So they don't change, monthly or something like that. It's not like the unemployment rate, but maybe every year to a year and a half, those multipliers should be will be updated. The other way to interpret that question around how often does the multiplier change might be, overall, the multiplier is industry specific. So in this case, it's based on this particular industry. If we were to choose, I'll just have to remember inorganic chemical manufacturing. But if I were to say, okay, actually, this isn't manufacturing, it's a full service restaurant, we would see a different multiplier here. So instead of the 2.2, we're seeing 1.3 in this case. So again, multipliers are industry specific. They're region specific, and we take care of that for you as we put your model together. You just need to tell us the industry to get the industry specific part. And then we update them when the newest multipliers are available, and that happens maybe every year, a year and a half. So I'm going to put this back to our original numbers here so we get our original multipliers. Going back to that report, we've got our economic impacts up here, 8.5 million in buildings and FF&E. We've also got this box telling us about residential development, how many people are relocating to the area and how many new homes might get constructed. And that's going to kind of round out some of this impact as we're focusing on the business activity, but as well as the residential activity. We've seen some of these numbers, or really a lot of these numbers before and throughout the model as we've been looking. We've got 862,000 of net benefit over 15 years. Again, it's relatively flat over time. We've got this little bit of up and down in the first couple of years, and then it's relatively flat over the 15 years. In my mind, that's better than it being down. Sometimes it's nice to see that line, that orange line going up, kind of trending upward, but this is a solid project, and that's from that standpoint. If we go down here, we'll look at our net benefit table. Again, we're kind of just seeing the detail of some of those original numbers. So the 862,000 in net benefits. We've got 1.9 million in benefits and about 1 million in costs. So if we kind of dig in a little bit on this, we can see we're getting some sales taxes and a good bit of real property taxes. We've got, this is one of our bigger line items, is utility revenue. This would be kind of, in this case for a city, and in Texas, we're looking at city-owned utility revenue. So utilities that are provided by the city that might be provided to the to the company or to these new households that are relocating. And in Texas, again, these might be different. I know we've got folks on from Texas and different states, but we've got utility franchise fees, which are essentially kind of gross receipts taxes charged essentially by cities, charged to utility companies for like electricity and natural gas and those sorts of things. So that's generally a pretty big line item for some cities, so we itemize that one out as well. On the cost side, we've got the cost of government services and we've got the cost of utilities. Again, these are the city-owned utility services, and if we look real close, what we're seeing is the utility revenue coming in at about 639, the utility costs about 642. That's, if you just add those two pieces together and take them out of the model, there's a net there of a slight cost to provide utilities, but it's really not on a net basis swaying the project one way or the other too far. So you could realistically take that one out. Sometimes utilities might be a significant part of the project in that, they're going to be a big water user and the city makes money on their water or whatever it might be. And the question here, just the utility information is programmed in as well. That's right. So we're making some assumptions, but essentially we're looking at in that particular city. So this case, I'm using City of Arlington, but the City of Arlington, their kind of average use for a business or for households, as we're estimating it here, is built in based on looking at their budget and their utility information. So that's already built in here. And it'll be different in every city, and in some cases, in this case, we have a little bit of a negative cost, so 639 and 642. The cost is slightly larger. Sometimes we'll see it the other way, where the city makes a little bit of a profit, so to speak, a little bit of a margin on the utilities. In this case, if you don't have some other information to say, well, they're really going to use a lot of utilities, and we're going to, really have, a lot of positive impact. But here it's almost a wash. If you wanted to just remove those from the analysis, we can do that. So on the fly, if you're doing this and you just this isn't all that interesting, we just want to remove it from the analysis to try to maybe focus in on more of the other moving parts. What we can do is go up here to our settings. So this gear icon in the upper right-hand corner for our settings. We can see all of the different parameters that we have control of. And this one actually relates to the city. So for the city, we want to remove the city utility revenue and the utility cost. So to do that, I'm on the city tab within our settings, and I want to hit edit defaults. This button is going to allow me to make changes to these inputs. So if I hit edit defaults, we can see now it opens up and I can actually click into some of these things and make changes. What I want to make change to is our utility revenue. So here we can see we've got our calculations for our revenue, city-owned utility revenue per household and per worker. These are the calculations that we do on our end, and it's included in your user guide to kind of step through how we get to those numbers. But if I just uncheck this, I'm going to remove that from the analysis. I'm also going to uncheck our cost of utilities. So we're getting rid of the revenue coming in and the cost going out, so to speak. And so in this case, we're just going to disregard utilities, so to speak. We're still going to include utility franchise fees because that's kind of on those, it's basically like a tax on outside utility providers. But with respect to city-owned utility revenue coming in and utilities costs going out, we're going to remove that. And obviously we can do this with other line items if we wanted to, but I'm just going to do it for our utilities here. I'll go back to my report, and we're seeing that our net benefits changed slightly. Not very much, but they're still around 860,000. But now we can see we no longer have a line item for utility revenue. We no longer have a cost of utility services. And so this kind of helps us focus in or zero in a little bit more on, the other moving parts of the project and disregard that. Another couple questions here. I'll just kind of address these as we go. Um, the question is, are we programming in the city's utility rates? And that's the answer is no to that question. What we're doing is we're looking at um, the amount of revenue that the city brings in from its utilities, and we're making the assumption that some of that comes from business activity, some of it comes from residential activity, and then we're coming up with those per capita or per household, excuse me, per household and per worker numbers to get an estimate of utility consumption. So to the specific point, the utility rates are not estimated in there. In some of our cases, as a baseline, I think that's a fair way to do it. And so that's the way a lot of our clients are set up. We do have some clients, which may be the case, I'm not sure. Actually, I see it says anonymous attendee for who asked this question. And so maybe I need to look into who that is. But for some of our clients, you can, you'll do kind of a little bit more work to actually get more information about the utilities that will be used. So if it's a big utility user and you want to apply those actual rates and figure out what the actual city-owned utility revenue will be, and then kind of basically doing a little bit of a side calculation and then plug that in there, you can do that. But for the majority of our clients, I will say it's done this way just by looking at the level of activity. The other question is talking about an incentive, and I will come back to that in just a minute, but feel free to keep plugging in questions or things you want me to talk about. So I've removed the utilities from this. We didn't touch on this, but we see this line for the FF&E property taxes has an asterisk down here. It tells us that the amount up here excludes the property tax abatement of $16,000. So we've already pulled that out. So this is kind of after that abatement is what we're looking at, this $865,000. And now we've got our incentive analysis again. We're looking at the $200,000 against our net benefits. Again, you can kind of hover over this stuff and kind of see what's going on. Total incentive, total cumulative net benefits by year 15, showing our payback periods and rate of return again. The question relating to the incentive has to do with being able to evaluate more than one incentive. So as an example, a grant for infrastructure and then another for jobs. And right now, we don't have that ability to kind of break that out into any more detail than essentially just one column of incentives. So what you would need to do if you wanted to do this sort of thing would be to figure out what is your per job incentive. Let's say that it was going to be $2,000 per job. And then they were, in addition to that, the $2,000 per job is already modeled. We got that. But then they also wanted, let's say, a $100,000 infrastructure grant. So the math is easy in this one, but it may not always be so easy. If we just wanted to say, okay, let's put another $100,000 in year one when we would pay out this infrastructure grant, we would just bump up the incentives in year one by 100,000. So instead of 50, it'd be 150. And so that would be the way to model it. So now you're looking at $300,000, that combination of the two things. And so we've got $300,000, and what we can do, the way that I would suggest addressing this would be in your and now if you're using the one-page report, this is the way it's going to look. So the summary report is showing 300,000. You would need to clarify 100,000 of that is for the infrastructure grant, and then 200,000 for the job creation grant. And technically, it's not $3,000 per job, and so on. But if you wanted to provide some more context that would appear in the detailed report, you could describe that $300,000 incentive, and you could even put in a table here as well. The way to do that, and you could have the table show a column for your incentives for the job creation grant, a column for the incentive, and then the total column. It's a little bit of a headache to type in there, but you can use this formatting help to try to show you how that comes about. But we can do some cool stuff with that formatting. So let me get back to my other one here for a minute. So we can provide that context about, essentially there's 300K in incentives, 100K for, and you can write this in a better sentence than I am here, for infrastructure, and 200K for jobs. And then you can write up a sentence, and then this is going to show up in your report. So again, we haven't looked at the detailed report just yet, but if you go here, we should see a section for our public support overview, and you can see I've written that out here, and you can write a whole paragraph if you want to provide more context to it. As I mentioned, you could even put in a table, kind of a custom table, to describe kind of the timing and the phasing of the $300,000 incentive. Let's see, I've got more questions I'll try to read through here. Cool. Okay, I think I answered it. I think that's the case. If not, type it again. So we're on our detailed report, but let's go back to our summary report. We kind of hit everything we wanted to on this one, I think. We have, I didn't realize this was confusing, but it is, I suppose. We have a print button up here. I think at this point, everybody knows that this is the way you would actually also create a PDF and save it. So technically what we're doing here is printing it using our browser's print function, and we should all be using Google Chrome because this is kind of optimized for Google Chrome. But when we hit print, the option here is to choose the destination to save as a PDF. So you don't actually have to print it. What you're actually doing is saving it as a PDF, but the button has always been called print, and I never realized how confusing that was. I never really put it together for myself. But anyway, that's just a point about the printing and really saving. So that, I'm not going to actually save it, but we'll do that. So that's everything I want to say about that summary report. The detailed report, as I mentioned, here, you can navigate. I think most people know this probably. You can navigate along this left-hand side to jump to the different sections that you want to see. If you wanted to get more detail on Tarrant County, we can see that here. And as you, depending on your project, you might have an appendix. We generally go into more year-by-year detail for some of the incentives. So if you're not doing any incentives, you won't get an appendix. If you're just doing like an infrastructure grant or something in 1 year, you won't see an appendix for that. But if there's a schedule or abatement values, you will see an appendix that shows up for you. So that is this one. Again, you use the same print feature to save a PDF of this. This one's going to turn out to be maybe, I don't know, 15 pages. Sometimes it depends on that. How many pages depends on that appendix sometimes. So in this case, we're talking about 16, but there's really not much on that last page. So that's everything I wanted to look at, kind of with some of those basics. I got into it a little bit here as I kind of started talking about the utilities. But I'll go into kind of interpreting some of these results. And as I look at this one and we see 865,000 as a net benefit for the city, if someone's asking me a question or if I'm preparing a report for someone, I like to, kind of take a step back at this point and think about, well, what are the major revenues, or what's really driving this project? And we can kind of start with the sales tax. We're getting about 200,000 in benefits from sales taxes, a little under 200,000. And then we're getting 550,000 in net benefits, or excuse me, in benefits from real property. So those two things together make up a big chunk of, well, not only the benefits, but ultimately the net benefits. And so those two, the way that we're modeling this based on, the capital investment that's being made, and then some of the other, spending by workers and so forth, and the sales tax off of construction, these sales taxes and real property taxes, I think we can generally feel pretty good about, in the fact that, we're not, sometimes it's like a questionable revenue at times. In this case, I feel pretty good about those. We've got a little bit in FF&E taxes. We probably feel pretty good about those as well. New residential property taxes, we're talking about 57,000 over 15 years. It doesn't sound crazy, and it's not like overwhelming the project. If this was 570,000 and the overall net benefit was 865,000, that's a pretty big chunk that we're expecting to get through residential property taxes as a result of this chemical manufacturer. Seems a little crazy. And then these other kind of utility franchise fees and miscellaneous taxes and user fees, they're adding up to a good amount. They're 400,000. That's pretty significant. But really, when we add in the costs, I mean, it's almost again turning into a little bit of a wash. So what's happening is as we account for the cost, the marginal cost of providing services to the new business or the new households, we're also picking up some additional revenues that those same users might generate. And so in this case, they're kind of washing out too. So what the main drivers are in this case, again, are sales taxes and property taxes of that 865,000. So I feel pretty good about this project. And as long as, let's say, the company invests the amount they are proposing to, so $8.5 million in investment, you can feel pretty good about this project performing for you. I'm going to take a look back at my list that we talked about what we were going to talk about today, just to make sure I'm kind of hitting everything here. So we talked a lot about entering data, modeling incentives, and interpreting results. Let's look at, we did a little bit of customizing on the benefits and costs, but let's do a little bit more on that, and we'll talk about the community report. So when folks call with questions, one of the most frequently asked questions, I suppose, is having to do with some of these adjustments of the net benefit. So, for example, sometimes a client will call and say, "Hey, we actually own the land on which this project is going to kind of build, and so we're going to get some money from this project, and we're going to get land sales revenue, and we want to incorporate that into our analysis so that this includes that." So the way to do that, and it's real easy to do it, is, again, a lot of these things, if it's not on that scenario info page, very often it's going to be up here in our settings. So if we click in the settings, again, this gear icon in the upper right hand corner, what we want to do is navigate to our city entity. So again, we're already on this city. We've already kind of opened this up so that we can start making changes to our inputs. And in this case, what we want to do is we want to create a direct revenue. This is going to be a new input, and we can call it whatever we want, but in this case, it's going to have to do with the land sale. And we're going to just create a new direct revenue that will give us an input to kind of capture that money. So this is going to be, let's just call it land sale. And that's our label. That's going to be shown throughout the report. So it's going to be when we go to scenario info to put the information in, it's going to be called land sale. And when we see it in the report in the different list of benefits, we're gonna see land sale. If you want to call it something different, if you want to say be more revenue for land sale or from land sale, whatever you want, you can do it, and it's going to show up as you type it. The only other option here, as you're kind of creating these revenues, is kind of generically called type, and our options are either no percent increase or percent increase. And this is just that idea that we can put in a value in year one and then let it increase over time. For something like a revenue from a land sale, where it's kind of going to be a one-time thing, I think the best way to do it is going to say no percent increase. The other thing you might do very often would be like lease revenue. So if you're leasing, like, airport hangars or something like that, if it was like an annual revenue from a lease, then you might use that percent increase. And even if it was a 0% increase year over year, you could use percent increase. But I'm not going to use percent increase in this case for our land sale. We're just going to leave it at that. The other thing I'll point out as we're on here, I can actually add as many of these as we want. So if we did have other revenues, we could add those here. This one, again, is happening for the city. It's a revenue that's going to the pocket of the city. So we're here on our city tab adding this revenue from land sale. So as I go back to our scenario info, we should already see a section, revenue from land sale for the city, and we can put that value in. So I'm just going to say, let's say it's $125,000, and that's going to be one time in year one. And everything's updating as we go. So we see our year one kind of shoot through the roof, so to speak. Now our net benefit in year one is $180,000, most of that being made up of the $125,000. So our numbers are all adjusting. So our net benefits have gone up by 125,000. If we go to our report, we're going to see a new line item down here, revenue from land sale, 125,000. And so everywhere we need to see it, our net benefits have gone up. Our incentive looks even better against that now because our net benefits have gone up as we accounted for that revenue for the land sale. So that, again, that being able to add a new revenue kind of as needed on the fly is really handy and answers a lot of the questions that we get from clients. Just to kind of complete this whole story here, we can actually add costs. So maybe, we were going to have some sort of out-of-pocket, traffic study. And because of this project, the city's going to have to do a traffic study, and we want to make sure that we put this into the overall cost benefit for this project. So again, maybe I'll just go and we can see I've got a traffic study as a city cost, and maybe it's going to be $50,000 or something. I'm just obviously making up stuff right now, but as we do this, again, we've added a cost for the traffic study showing us 50,000. Bringing our net benefit down slightly from where it was right before we did that. So that's a handy thing from time to time. And the other thing is, if you need to, get rid of that, of course, you can just come in. Well, there's a couple of ways. You could just go in and delete the revenue. Delete, in this case, it was whatever, 125,000, or you can just uncheck your box here, and it's going to remove it from the analysis. I'm not sure why it didn't remove it right away, but we can reload this, and it should take it off of there. Most often, I will say you don't have to reload the pages. As you see, everything kind of just happens in real time. Every now and then, if something isn't working exactly as you expect, it can be worthwhile just giving it a quick refresh. And now we can see we've gotten rid of that line item. We've gotten rid of that revenue, and we can see now we're down to 815 because we left the traffic study in. There we go. Let's go back to my PowerPoint just to remember what we're talking about. Oh, community report. Let's talk about how to use the community report. So in this case, we've got, as we were talking about earlier, we had an incentive from the City of Arlington and Tarrant County in terms of the property tax, and then a $300,000 non-tax incentive from the city. What might be of interest would be to generate a summary report. So kind of like a one-pager, but you want more than just the City of Arlington. So we could get City of Arlington, and here it is, or we can get Tarrant County by itself, and here it is. We're seeing our abatement for the county. But if we wanted to just generate a report that would show the city and the county on one page together, the way to do that is with our community report. So here, under summary report, after we list all of the taxing jurisdictions that are included in the analysis, we've got this community report. I can click on there. When I do that, we can configure this community report to include whichever jurisdictions we'd like. So right now, as we look at it, we've got columns for each of the jurisdictions until we get down to too many, and then we just throw them all into other. But we've got the city, the county, the school district, and then here I think it's like maybe the college and the hospital are getting lumped together into this column. And then we see the total. So across all of the jurisdictions in this report, the net benefits are about $2 million. But again, maybe what we're interested in is being able to show the city and the county as a combined group, and just focus on those two entities. So what I'm going to do is click up here on configure, and this is where I can choose which districts I want to be included in this community impact summary. So I don't want the college in this case, and I don't want the hospital, and even for our purposes, we don't want the school district, but I do want to leave City of Arlington and Tarrant County. So if I hit done on this screen after I've configured it, we've got our kind of aggregated net benefits for the two jurisdictions that we've indicated. So the city and the county together are getting about $1.2 million in net benefits. And if we look kind of down here, we can see we're noting even our non-tax incentive of $300,000 with our payback period. And with Tarrant County, we're looking here and we only have our footnotes for those 2 property tax abatements, a total of 25,000. So this is really showing us everything. And actually, one of the extra numbers that you get to see here is if you were to think of this $300,000 as an investment on behalf of both the city and the county, the payback period would shorten to 4.3 years. So you're just comparing kind of apples to apples. If the city is offering this incentive, they're the ones investing the 300,000. Well, based on the 815,000 in net benefits, it's going to take them 6.3 years to get paid back. But if you take a little bit of a broader view on the $300,000 investment, the $1.2 million in net benefits gets you paid back a little bit sooner, 4.3 years. So this community report can be really helpful if you're trying to kind of, show the impact across maybe all of the jurisdictions or maybe just a couple of them. So again, if we want to remove them, we clicked off in those little X's. If we want to add them back, we can do that here. And so I'll just kind of keep adding some back in here. And we can configure this however we would like. But the community report has come up as a pretty good solution to some of our clients' problems recently in terms of trying to get unique reporting situations. Let me see what we got. All right, so I was going to go through reminders. Let's go back. Naming projects and scenarios, copying scenarios, charts and tables, my account. Okay. We talked about the charts and tables, so that was kind of just reminding you that those items existed. So throughout the app, you have the ability to kind of, you're usually seeing a graph, but you can get a table of those results. So that can be helpful if you're trying to just figure out, well, what exactly is that number? And you can pull it up and copy this over to a table or whatever you need to do with it. We talked a little bit about naming, so the projects and scenarios, but I wanted to point out, and maybe everybody knows this, but I think it can be helpful just to kind of remind everyone of this. We can edit these names again. So I've got my scenario named 100 jobs. We can add, all kinds of crazy things to this. 100 jobs with 300K incentive, let's say. We can change the name like that, and there it is on the fly. And the same thing with the project. We can call it Project BTA, or we can call it, the name of the actual company. We can call it XYZ Co. Whatever you want, you can rename these things. What I want to point out to you, though, is that if you're generating reports with these, and that's kind of one of your takeaways, that you're either distributing various ways, the name of the project and the scenario is going to appear on each one of these reports. So for the summary reports, it's generally right here at the top. We can see both the project name and then the scenario are here. And on a detailed report, it's going to be at the top as well. We've got the name of the project here, impact report, and then the scenario. So sometimes, you might want to use that actual kind of project name. So you're keeping it kind of hidden. You can see that is showing there. And you might just want, maybe you call it 100 jobs because that's going to help you kind of distinguish it. Other times, when I'm trying to, if I'm trying to hide the name, so to speak, where I don't want to make it obvious that we're doing a million different scenarios, and maybe this is the final one and we just want to go with it. I mean, obviously you could call it final, but again, that final is going to pop up on your project. If you're trying to be a little bit discreet, you could just put the date. So like if you wanted to do the date like that, it technically is the scenario name, and you'll need to remember that that date is the scenario that you were working on. But ultimately it just kind of shows up throughout the report as a date, and it doesn't necessarily raise any suspicions as if you're detailing out maybe the long list of things that I've seen in scenario names. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of point that out. Again, if you're, depending on how you're naming things, you just want to be aware that that's going to show up on your reports. Sometimes the things like the description, as I mentioned, this only shows up in the detailed report. And so that's fine. You might not care and you might not even be using a detailed report, but the scenario name and the project name are going to show up on the report, whether it's the summary report or the more detailed report. I need to remember what is on this other thing. Let's see. Charts and tables, copying scenario. So another one that comes up from time to time. I think everybody gets it, but it is a little bit hidden. So I will say you might do a better job of making it clear. But on a particular scenario, if you want to make another iteration of this and you don't want to have to retype all the information, it's real easy just to come here and click copy. So this little kind of double squares kind of duplicating thing, that is our copy icon. And so if we click on this, we would just be able to create a copy of that. In this case, I'm going to make a copy of the 125 jobs scenario. Well, this is bringing up something that I wasn't going to talk about, but we can talk about it. So this is, I'm making a copy of a scenario, and what this is telling me is that we've made updates to the tax rates since that scenario was created. And so I'm getting the option as I make this copy to either use the newest tax rates and other data. We're kind of using a shorthand for tax rates, but it's really all of the background information. So I can either use the newest tax rate. So when I make a copy, I'll actually grab the newest, background information for that district. And that might be what you want to do. So if you're working on one in the fall and then the newest tax rates come out and we update your account, and now you want to, make a copy of that scenario and use the newest tax rates, that might be what you want to do. In other cases, you might not want to copy, you might not want to use the newest tax rates. You might just legitimately want a straight copy of the previous scenario, even with the old tax rates in there. And so you have that option, and we're kind of notifying you. In most cases, if you hit copy, you're not going to get asked this because it won't be in that time period where you have new tax rates built in. But anyway, that's what this little warning is about. So in my case, I'm going to say, yeah, let's use the newest tax rates. And this is, I don't even know if they're legitimately new or if I just changed some things. When you create that copy, you'll see now our scenario is now called copy of 125 jobs. And so this is a good time to change the scenario name to whatever you might want to make it. So that's copying. I'm actually going to jump back to our PowerPoint because I've got one more thing about my account. The my account stuff, I was just going to point out that as you're kind of navigating your account, Impact Dashboard, you're logged in, you're looking at all your projects, wherever they are. Down here, just by sign out, you have this My Account section. And this is where you can update your logo, you can change the color scheme, you can change some general information. And you can also get your user guide. As I mentioned, a lot of information can be found in your user guide. You can also, if we've uploaded any files for you, sometimes there's different things that templates that we put together for you for an individual client, we would upload those and they would be here on your My Account settings. The other things within your My Account would be the tags that you can create. We didn't really talk about tags today, but that's okay. You can see, okay, I have 4 projects in downtown. You can either delete that tag, probably don't want to do that because you've got 4 tagged with that, or jump straight to those 4 projects that are tagged with the downtown. So there we go. Let me, man, I meant to leave a little bit more time for this, but we're going to jump over and do our sneak peek at some of the updates that we've got going on. So again, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in, but I'm going to go through and show some of these new features. So what are the new features? So here's a list, kind of a high-level list of the major points of our new features. So we're going to have kind of an expanded business retention and expansion impact analysis. So many of the projects that you run and that you've already run kind of contain an existing component where they have some current level of operation, and then they're planning an expansion. And so really, we're building in kind of a brand new way to approach that, where you're going to be able to isolate and say, these are the jobs that they currently employ, this is the property that they currently support, and then this is the new stuff, and being able to kind of separate those, but then aggregate them together into one report, so to speak. We're also adding hotel nights and taxes. So again, and visitor spending. you've been able to kind of hack together hotel occupancy taxes and kind of plug it in as a custom revenue, and it doesn't really calculate. You have to like figure out the taxes yourself and then plug in whatever the actual collections would be. And then that hasn't been the best way to do it, obviously, but now that's going to be fully integrated into the model. We've got new categories for project type and industry. We've got a new report that will be what we're calling a project fact sheet. And then we're expanding the data form in a whole bunch of ways. So I've got screenshots here. I'll just kind of go through those quickly. So for the BRE impact analysis, the screenshot here is showing us what it's going to look like in the future in the case of an existing business. So a company that already has an existing presence in the community. You're going to see a new section on the scenario info page for current operations, where we're going to ask what's the market value of their property, how many jobs do they have right now, what are they paying their employees, and then some of their other current levels of activity. We can see on this screen, we've got a tab or kind of an option for you to select expansion only or total combined. This is going to dictate how we're going to show the results, whether we're going to show you the results of just the impact of the expansion, or we're going to kind of put everything together and show the current operations as well as the expansion. And so it's really, to generate reports is just as easy as kind of clicking that little button at the top there. So just a couple more screenshots for this BRE element. So when it is this case of an existing business that might be expanding, if you just want to focus on the expansion, we're going to clarify that for you. So here we've got 100 direct jobs. Those are associated with the expansion. And we're noting, you can see this is a brand new note that says, this summary does not include the impact from the company's current activity, which includes 35 retained jobs at $50,000 a year. So this is, and kind of throughout, we've got details. The detailed report is going to have, where you'll be able to see the impact of the current operations, the impact of the expansion, and then the total combined. But here we're just taking a couple screenshots on the summary report, just to show you what the total combined scenario would look like, or summary report would look like. We're saying, okay, it's 135 direct jobs. That's the total combined of the new jobs, which are 100 new jobs, and then 35 retained. So that's what we're kind of presenting in this case. So again, you're going to have options of however you want to present it. In the case of maybe a retention project where you have the possibility of losing their current portion of the business, you might want to take that broader view and say, okay, the net benefits from the combined operations of the existing activity and the new is 937, as opposed to, if we just look at the expansion is only 785,000 in this case. So anyway, that is the BRE element. The hotel nights and visitor spending, essentially, these are just straight up inputs for you. So you're going to be able to identify how many hotel nights are being supported by the project. And then we can have defaults for the hotel daily rate and just general visitor spending per hotel night. And so these are going to be new inputs that you'll have access to. And then on our side, we'll be building in your hotel occupancy tax rate, or whatever, it might not be called that in some locations, but essentially we'll have the naming correct for your lodger's tax, transient occupancy, or whatever it might be. So that's our hotel element. We've got these new inputs for project type and industry, and we've already seen it here a little bit, but on the project tiles, you can see we've got this is our project type. You can see I've created some that are called, in this case, business retention and expansion, new/startup, and recruitment. I've created just 3 different categories of these for project types, but you can name these however you'd like. So if you want to call them recruitment, or maybe relocations, or maybe use different terminology to kind of group your project types, you can do that. The other element is industry. So these are kind of like your target industries. We're already collecting information about the NAICS code for a project, but now you can create buckets for different industry types. So again, we've got, in my case, I've made up some: aerospace and defense, hospitality and tourism, advanced manufacturing, You know, there's lots of different target industries. You can type in whatever you'd like. So as I mentioned, this is going to be some advanced customization that you'll have the ability to do in your account. So this is again, my test account. You will have the control to kind of name your project types and name your industries. And again, these are going to show up on the reports. So this is our summary report. We can see in this case, the label for the project type and the industry are being noted here as well. And this will happen throughout the reporting, so it'll be on the detailed report as well. Project fact sheet. So the project fact sheet is a brand new report that we're going to allow you, or that's going to be, you know, generated, and it allows you to kind of provide some more qualitative information about your project. So here, this is a little bit of a screenshot of it. This is going to be found on the report page. It's up here. We can see I've clicked on the fact sheet. This is just listing out some of the specifics. So we can see that the NAICS code is listed. We're identifying the amount of square footage and the type of use they're going to be using it for there. The facility, they're telling us that this particular project is in addition to an existing building already owned. They're giving us the dates for when they break ground or begin operations. We're also summarizing the employment numbers that they told us. So they told us 120 direct new jobs, and then they've got 200 retained in this case. And giving some payroll numbers, both the average salaries and then total payroll. We're giving information about the company here as well that you'll be able to plug in and identify who the company is, when they were established, what type of ownership, and so forth. So this fact sheet really is summarizing some more of the qualitative aspects of a project. We're actually not doing any real impact analysis on this fact sheet. This is just showing what is the company planning to do. When you get to the summary report, that's where you would see, you know, the application of multipliers and all that sort of stuff. And again, we're seeing our project type and our industry listed on this fact sheet as well. So I'm imagining anyway, at the end of the year, if you've had, say 5 projects that you've worked on, you can print out these PDFs for the fact sheet and kind of just provide details about what the project was and, you know, everything about each of those 5 projects and being able to easily categorize and organize them with these new project type and industry. And so directly related to that project fact sheet is going to be this expanded project and company data form. So as I mentioned, a lot of these inputs aren't really a part of your account right now. They aren't a part of Impact Dashboard. We don't ask about square footage anywhere. We don't ask about you know, their plans to build or lease or something like that. We don't ask about the company's, you know, history and so forth. But with these upgrades, the big update that we're going to be releasing, you will have access to all of those inputs and more. One of the things we can see in this screenshot, this is just showing and we can't even get them all in this screenshot, but these are kind of the expanded inputs that we'll have. So information about the site, the square footage. In this case, we're seeing even the ability to kind of list the jobs, the positions by number of employees and the average salary for each one, and we'll kind of add up and get that overall average salary for you. We're even going to be able to ask about benefits. And here, just some inputs around the company so they can tell us different pieces of information. So we're expanding the type of information that you can collect and gather, and we're going to make it easy for you to actually go out and request that of prospects with kind of a new customizable data form and inbox. So this is just a screenshot kind of showing an inbox of we've received a new data form, and then from that inbox we can create a scenario with it. And so what you're going to be able to do in the future is send out a data form. This feature kind of exists right now where you can send a data request to a prospect, but it's going to be enhanced quite a bit. And so you're going to have the ability to kind of configure a data form, as I kind of have a screen video here of this, where I can choose which questions I want to include on that data form. And so the prospect will only be asked the questions that I want them to answer, and I can remove as many as I want or put on all of them, whatever I want to do. And then when you send the data form to someone, they're going to get a new interactive way to do this. And it'll be kind of in this wizard format that I'm kind of clicking through here, where they'll be able to answer questions about their project and then plug in information, as much information that you wanted, the specific inputs that you wanted to ask. And that's going to be one of the big new features here, being able to create a data form and then even post that on your website, so that you can direct folks to go to your website and fill out the data form. Let me see if there's any other questions in here. I think that, okay, so those are a little bit of a sneak peek, just to give you some more information on the release. So when are these new features coming? I don't have the exact date, but very soon. So sometime later this month, or at the latest, I would say early September. And kind of who gets it? Well, pretty much everybody. So all accounts are going to get full access automatically. There's, when we release this, it'll be across the board, everyone's going to get it. So not pretty much everybody, 100% everybody. We're going to be doing, so there's a lot going on in these new features and these new updates for you. So we're going to be doing a webinar series with a detailed demonstration of each of these features, and kind of really show you, how everything works. So everything that we talked about today already, kind of all the going over the basics, everything that really won't change. That's all going to be there still. But we're basically adding on, several layers of advanced features for you. And so we're going to go through how you use those specifically. We're also going to have a new online knowledge base that you can kind of search questions and answers, or see demos or screenshots of different things to kind of get more familiar with it. You still have the ability to give me a call or send me an email whenever you have problems. That's honestly probably the easiest way to do it, because sometimes there's just tricky things that are going on and you want an answer. And then as a part of all of this, as we release things, we're going to have kind of one-on-one assistance to create and post your data form. So kind of helping you through set that up. And so we're going to, certainly at any time you can reach out and ask for some help, and we'll jump on a GoToMeeting or a Zoom with you. But we're going to kind of systematically walk through and kind of make sure everyone is aware of the features and has getting the most out of those new features. So I'm a little bit over. I apologize for going over, and I saved the best stuff for last for sure. But if you have any other questions, oh shoot, there's a bunch here. I'll stay here and answer them. If you need to go and jump off, I understand. So the one of the questions here, okay, I'm backing up. Sorry, I totally missed these as they were coming in. So when will the updates be available to use? We addressed that kind of later this month, possibly September, but hopefully later this month in August. Will the BRE work if a company is building a new facility or expanding their current one, but not creating new jobs? Yeah, so you'll be able to put in new investments, get new property taxes, but no new jobs. So you can leave jobs blank. So let's see. The question around who is populating the data in the fact sheet. In reality, it's most likely going to be kind of a joint effort between you and the prospect. So a lot of those questions that are coming through on that fact sheet can be asked of the prospect, but then when you go on to fill out some of the description and some of the other information, you would be able to enter that in. So the short answer is, I would suggest that you ask the prospect to fill in as much of that information as possible, but they're going to be doing it in that new online data form feature. And you do have the ability to control which questions they're seeing. So you might not, let's say if you didn't ask about square footage of the prospect, you would need to later go back in and put in the square footage in that. Let's see, the other question, so the fact sheet is something that you're going to have control over to kind of massage. So they're going to give you the information. You'll basically take a copy of what they say in their data form, and then just paste that into this scenario, and then you'll be able to edit it from there if need be. I think that is pretty much it about those new pieces. There is one question here about best practices to show the economic impact of projects that are a few years old. So I'll kind of keep talking here, and certainly feel free to type in questions. Man, I'm like realizing there's a lot of questions that I'm missing. But feel free to keep typing them in. I'll stick around for as long as you want, but feel free to jump off if you need to. So best practices around economic impact of projects that are a few years old. Well, in those cases, you would sometimes be able to kind of get a little bit better data to put into the model. So what I'm talking about is they might have told you in a preliminary analysis that they plan to hire 100 jobs, 100 workers. But in reality, how many did they actually hire? So if it's a few years old, you might be able to update that to say, okay, well, they hired 95 jobs. So you can plug that in. You might even get the hiring schedule over time to say, okay, well, in year one, they hired 60 and then 35 in year two. So that's one thing that you can do as you're looking at an old one. The other one, an old project that's a few years old. The other thing that's going to come into play would be you're going to have the benefit of being able to look on the tax rolls and see, how their investment translated into taxable property. So you would be able to presumably go out to the county assessor, and if this is kind of too complicated, send me a note and tell me who it is and what the background was, and I can help you look it up. But you'll go out to the county assessor's data, and you'd be able to see for that company at that particular site, their property came on the tax rolls for this amount. And so you still might know, hey, they invested $5 million, but then when I go out there, it was only taxed at $3.5 million. So then you might make those adjustments in the model. So that would be a good way, again, looking at those old projects to model it today would be you'd be able to have a little bit better data going into it. And honestly, it's probably a good exercise to do on some of those old ones and just kind of see how some of those assumptions you were making, came together. Did you assume it was going to be on the tax rolls for $5 million, but in reality, once they assessed it, it only came on at 3.5. And so does that help you on your future projects? So that might be something to look at somewhat regularly there. Trying to read through these as I'm talking. It's really, I'm not good at double tasks here. Nicole, if you're on and you see something that I missed and suggest I talk about, feel free to jump in and tell me.
It looks like you've answered all of them.
Okay. Okay, I know. Well, then that is great to hear. If you have other questions, whether they're just anything in general, feel free to send me an email directly, and I can follow up with you. As I mentioned, we've got a big update coming for you. Lots of new features for you, and I'm really excited about it. On our side, obviously, we've been hard at work putting this together for you. Josh and Matt, our two developers, have been hard at work putting this update together and testing it with us. And so we're really excited to get it out there. I think it's going to be really helpful. And once we do, certainly give us feedback and help us keep improving here on this. But thanks again for everyone joining us today. We'll be in touch with more information about the updates, and can't wait to share it with you. Thanks so much.